Hello, welcome to another Sunday with me to talk about languages. Thank you for joining, and yeah, it's great to be back. Always a pleasure to talk about my favorite subject, and look forward to hearing from you as well. Like every time I do these lives, I've organized a topic to discuss in the beginning, and then I'll come back through all the comments on YouTube and on Instagram, check through and see if there are any questions for me to answer, and I will be happy to answer anything that is important to you. And just to say, if you are interested in more contact with me, then you're very welcome to work with me with your languages. There's an application still open at the moment to work with me directly, and I will assess the applications to see where I think I can be of most use. There's also a Patreon page that you can also join. The link is in the description on the YouTube video, also on my website, speakingfluently.com. And if you join Patreon, then you get to ask me questions, write backwards and forwards, and also potentially have meetings with me as well as either group or individual or a mixture of both. And so we will be able to be in touch with your very specific questions and needs, and I'd be very, very happy for you to join the group. There's a nice group of us that get together regularly to talk about languages, so you're very, very welcome to do that. And but today the question is about this whole idea of, I've called it a language funnel. Now, it might sound like a strange thing to call something a language funnel, right? But the idea, and I was looking for a funnel so that I could show you, but I don't have one handy today. But what I do have is a bottle, and a bottle is quite good for doing this because a bottle also shows you a sort of a funnel shape. And so what I want to explain to you is sort of where I see language learning and when we learn particularly lots of different languages. So people often ask about how much you should learn, and is it worth learning languages if you only learn a little bit, or if you only learn them to a basic conversational level, or should we learn them all to a very high level, or, you know, can we do a mixture of the two? My feelings is on this, that we can do a mixture of the two. And in fact, it doesn't make much sense to study every single language unless you particularly have a need for a very high level to study them to a very high level. I think you should know what that level is based on your needs, whether it's for work, for your family, for where you live, for what you need to do, how you need to function for your studies, for example. All of those reasons will give you an idea of the kind of level that you want to be at in a language. Mostly for most people who travel, work, want to have a bit of a conversation in a language with people, a level of, for a tourist, an A1 level is usually perfectly fine. A2 is absolutely fine for a tourist, and then you can start talking as well with people if you practice it regularly and you really cement all the vocabulary and structures taught at an A2 level. B1 is getting a lot more confident with the material, and you would be able to have quite normalish conversation fairly well, and usually quite fluently. And the question then becomes, what do you want to do and why do you want to do it? Once you start getting to the B2, C1 and C2 levels, you're really talking about expanding your vocabulary to quite a large degree. And this is where the funnel idea comes in, okay? So let's pretend this is my funnel, and let's say here, for example, at the very bottom, you've got kind of the A1 here. Now, when you learn a language to this kind of level, you could actually keep just putting water in the top, and imagine the water being the language, where it's the words and the grammar structures that put together, and the water could flow out like this. So it could start flowing. When it's at an A1 level, there isn't that much in terms of grammar and vocabulary. There's enough to kind of get a message across and to make yourself understood to a basic level, but it's not, say, something that you're going to have really in-depth conversations with. So if you manage to get it to this level, what it means is that, first of all, the feeling of getting to a point where you can speak from zero feels quite quick. So you'll often see people getting to this level quite quickly, and we can also perceive from the outside that people are learning languages really quickly because they're saying things quite quickly. Well, saying something from nothing is quite a quick thing. Where it gets a little bit more in depth is really with the vocabulary and being able to use and manipulate that vocabulary in an easy and fluent and fluid manner. And this is where you start to get this increase. And what you'll notice is, to get to this A1 level, it's kind of a steady amount. Grammar and vocabulary, it's all sort of a straight up thing, right? Whereas when you start going up to the sort of the A2, it's maybe a little bit more vocabulary. You'll go broadening your vocabulary, and you're able to say a lot more stuff on many more different topics. A lot of pretty much you will cover pretty much all of the day-to-day topics by A2. So you'd be able to talk about times, the weather, your family, your future plans, what you like to do, what you don't like to do, what the weather's doing, what your job is, what you do for in your free time. All those kinds of things normally would be part of your A2 level exam. Being able to talk about your daily routine, all that kind of stuff is quite normal. There may also be a little bit more to it, but generally speaking, that's what you're doing at A2. You're doing a lot more than, say, at A1. You filled in a lot more vocabulary and a lot more of those topics. To keep filling this, and when I say to keep filling it, to keep pouring in water, obviously the amount of water, the amount of vocabulary you have is much more than here. It's double this. What that means is, to practice that and to keep it fresh and to keep it in your head, you will need a receptacle that will keep that water so you can pour it back in again and keep refreshing it. But that means that you take more time refreshing it. You have more to practice, you have more to go over, you have more to learn, you have more to commit to memory, and you have more that you need to make fluent, fluid, and natural in your conversation. And that's why languages, sometimes, if we rush them too much in the beginning and get to this A2 level, we can start to see holes or gaps in our knowledge because we don't have the time to keep repeating it. So yes, sometimes you can rush and go through a language quite well. I did this with Estonian in the summer. I've done this with a couple of languages. I did it with Estonian, I've done it with German. The key difference between German and Estonian for me was that with German, I was in Germany, I was using German all the time. And so I got a lot of that practice in and out, in and out, in and out with the sort of the words and the grammar. And so this level really was very easy for me to maintain and then to build on. With Estonian, I kind of got to this level where I could communicate quite a lot of stuff. Sort of, it wasn't particularly sophisticated language, but I could communicate quite a lot. But what I found was that for me to repeat this was a lot more effort because I'm not in Estonia. I wasn't in Estonia when I learned Estonian. And so you have to do quite a lot to get through all of the topics and all of the things that you've learned to retain the knowledge. So what you can find is that you get some attrition. So you start forgetting some of the language and you feel like you're going back to kind of the A1-ish level. Sometimes you can go right down if the level is for a language that is not related to another language you speak. If it's a language related to a language you speak, sometimes it can be easier to retain the new language. Sometimes it could be easier, sometimes it actually can be harder, but that's a different question for another day. What you then see is once you've got to this kind of A2 level, and it's enough for a lot of things that many people want to do with language, whether it's travel, just communicating, understanding some basic stuff, getting the gist of a text, and you can understand a lot more with a dictionary or with a bit of extra help, support in the language. If you want to go up to the higher levels, so the B1, the B2, C1, C2, what you find is where you've got to the A2 here, to get to the B1, let's say it goes to here, that is basically double what, sort of everything you've done at A1 and A2 again for B1. And that means that the amount of vocabulary that you have to learn to speak at a true B1 level is actually quite a lot more involved. There's a lot more of it. And so you can imagine that if you have that much more content that you have to keep pouring through the funnel to get it, the circular practice going with the language, you can well imagine that takes a lot more time, a lot more effort, and a lot more commitment. It's not that it's not possible to do, it definitely is possible to do. It's a question I get very often when people ask me, well, what do I do now with the language? How do I improve the amount? Well, the truth is, because A2 is quite a comfortable level to start speaking, what we can do is fall into a trap of a circular loop just with the A2 level stuff. And we can just end up recycling that over and over again, get very, very confident with it. And you can do quite a lot with an A2 level. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't push you necessarily through into the B1, B2 level vocabulary. In order to do that, you have to make quite a lot of effort and get out of your comfort zone. And you have to do it in a number of different topical spheres. So you have to talk about many things that you may not normally talk about. It's very easy with your italki teacher or your language partner or whoever you use the language with, to very much just talk about very basic things that you learn at A1 and A2. It's super, super simple to do that, and many people do. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you want to go further on, you then have to make sure you decide, how far do I want to fill this funnel up? Do I want it to go up to here? Have I got time and energy, and do I have someone to talk to on a regular basis to keep replenishing this level of language? Or do I want to keep it at a more steady flow that's more manageable for myself and actually still get away with a nice conversation that gives me some satisfaction? That question is something that only you can answer. And I don't think that it's right for me or anyone else to necessarily prescribe what you should do. It all comes down to personal choice, personal circumstances, and also a realistic look at what you want and also what you're happy with. Because if you're not happy with this at the moment, the A2 level, and you're like very unhappy, desperately unhappy, you either A, have to make peace with your situation and what you're doing, or B, make changes to make going for a B1 or B2 level more realistic in the language, because it involves a lot more work, and it involves a lot of active work to work through all of that, to talk to people about those topics, to talk to people on topics that maybe your regular sessions might be, oh, what have you done? What have you been doing recently? Oh, I went to this place and I saw this and I saw that. And you can quite happily talk about that easily at an A2 level. But to be able to talk about things, I don't know, like military service, or about very technical stuff about, the opera or the theatre or things like that, you find that type of vocabulary starts to come in at a B1 level. So in my Greek book, for example, there's a whole thing about the arts in Greek. So you can talk about the stage and, what's happening and all the kind of very intricate details. Similar thing with things about, renting a flat. It's not just how many rooms has it got, you're asking more detailed questions about the place. So it's a question I think I'm going to throw back at you and say, what is it that you want, and are you happy with what you're doing with your languages? I mean, please do write in the comments and say how you get over this. I'd be interested to know what you do. Do you find that, getting a level of an A2, is that enough for you? Do you feel a peer pressure, or is it a real need to speak a language at a higher level? And if so, is it something you feel you can do, you can't do? If not, why not? Or is it something that, for example, you think you can do, but maybe you might not use so easily? How realistic is it for you to do it? I think these are the kinds of questions that you need to ask yourself. And it'd be good if you want to write as well in the comments. It'd be good to read to see what you think. These are the kinds of questions as well that I can help answer, and often do for a number of people in the groups where we study together. So yes. Right, So please do remember to like these lives if you haven't done already. I can see on YouTube that I've got way more people who are in that haven't liked it than I have people who have liked it. So please do help me by liking these streams. It's one way to support me, and I really do appreciate that support. It's a way to show me that even, you know, from wherever you are in the world, it's an easy way for you to show me that you care that I do these, um, and that, you know, you want to give me the support to do more of these lives. I'm very, very happy to do them because I enjoy your company every week. So yes, please do. Thank you very much for the hearts. Please do also give me a follow if you're not following me already, so that you can get updated when I update, whether it's a question or if I have something else I'm going to do. And I will do more things in the future now that things are opening up as well. I'm hoping that I'll be able to start organizing some events in person. If you have places that you'd like me to arrange things in person, let me know. I was thinking of doing days or weekends where we would get together and really sort of sit down and go through language learning exercises and talk as groups of people about how we get on to sort of get together. The other thing I wanted to say is that, yeah, nice bottle. This is a fizzy or carbonated water in here locally. It's called Pelisterka, which is it's a mountain in the south of the country, and so yeah, it's actually really, really nice carbonated water. I really like it. So yes, I wanted to also say that, you know, if you do have questions and you want more support, then please do join on Patreon. It's also a good place. I do put some public stuff on there as well, and I will definitely have a look if I can answer any questions. I definitely will, and also any topics that you want me to talk about for the future. I will prioritize anything written on Patreon ahead of other social media, and please feel free to do that. Okay, so I've got to pretty much the end of what I wanted to talk about in terms of the funnel and how it is to maintain languages. And if you can imagine then, if you duplicate this for multiple languages, you have a lot of funnels to keep you know, brimming with water. This is also part of the reason why I say not everybody has to learn languages in the same way. So some people will learn languages to an A2 level, B1 maybe max, but quite often will do A2, and they'll do it in a number of languages and they'll be quite happy, and that's fine. They don't necessarily need to have any real mastery of the language. They might just want to be able to get by and chit chat to a number of people in different languages, and it can work fairly well. There are certain languages where if you learn them to an A2 level and you go to the country, you're less likely to be able to use that language than others. So a country like the Netherlands, for example, if you go to the Netherlands and you're just content with an A2 level, it's going to be much more difficult for you to use your A2 level Dutch than it would be for you to go to Hungary and learn A2 level Hungarian and use your Hungarian. And the reason I say that is that typically in Hungary, there are many people who don't speak English as well as in, say, the Netherlands. The Netherlands people tend to speak English very well. So really, with a language like Dutch, the entry point to start talking to people who use the language can be a bit higher, because they will often just say, oh, let's just speak English, and because for them it's easy. Whereas in some countries you can just speak kind of an A2 level and you will be able to speak to a lot of people. Poland is another example, but there are many examples where you would be able to just use the local language if you learn it to an A2 level in Europe, particularly where people tend to have dubbed television, or they don't really come across other languages as often. So yeah, you will be able to in some countries, but not everyone. But if you're doing it as a hobby at home and you're just interacting with people and talking and playing on the internet, then I mean, you know, maybe an A2 level is all you need. and it's keep the funnel in mind when you're thinking and making your plans. You can decide what you want to do, how far you want to fill the funnel before you whether you move forward or whether you go to another language. Yeah. Cool. Let me see the questions I have. I'm going to start on YouTube because I started on Instagram last time. So I'll look at the comments on YouTube first, and then I'll move to the questions on Instagram. And just to clarify, because I had a few questions about this, I go to the start of the questions. I scroll up. So if it seems like I'm ignoring your question, I'm not. I'm just starting from the top. I'm going back to the most recent. So by the end of the live, I should be pretty much up to date with where everyone is. So yes, let me see. Okay. So I see here, hey Richard, just wanted to see experience with learning Czech. How did you go about it? And do you think it's insanely hard as everyone makes it out to be? Can someone become fluent? George, yes, you can become fluent in Czech. There are many people that do and live and function in the Czech Republic as people who have moved from other countries, and they do it quite well. For other Slavic language speakers, it is much easier, there's no doubt. So people from Poland, Slovakia, for example, will learn it very, very quickly. In fact, I met people who had been there for just a month or so, and they were communicating in Czech really, really quickly from those countries. But the further out you go from the language itself, the more different the language, the more time it takes to pick up the grammar and also the vocabulary. So a language like Czech that has a lot of cases, but also a lot of these consonant clusters. It's like prst. It takes time to get that without putting in other vowel sounds for a number of language speakers. Can you learn it though? Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I studied a diploma in advanced Czech studies at Charles University. So basically I did an advanced diploma in the language, which then enables you to go and study through the medium of Czech at university in Czech Republic. And that's kind of what I did. I lived with a Czech family, and so I spoke Czech every day with the family. In fact, there was not really another option. It was Czech, Czech or Czech. I mean, the mum didn't speak any English. The daughter did speak some English, but we never really did. Her partner at the time didn't speak English at all, so we spoke just Czech. And the bunny that they had, of course, didn't speak Czech, didn't speak English either. So I'd speak Czech to the bunny. But yes, it is possible. It does take time. If it's your first Slavic language, whatever your first Slavic language may be, whichever it is, it takes time to really start to internalize those new ways of thinking. There's just no two ways about it. You have a new set of vocabulary to learn. Also, the prefixes can be quite challenging. The perfective and imperfective verbs, to my mind, are actually in the end more complex to get right than grammatical cases. Grammatical cases tend to actually, they look scarier, and there they are. I mean, I don't get them right in all of the Slavic languages I speak 100% of the time, but they can be corrected more easily because you can hear when they're wrong. Whereas with on the whole, whereas with imperfective and perfective verb forms, sometimes you might get them wrong in a Slavic language, but only wrong from your point of view, and you don't necessarily know that you've got them wrong. The only way you know is if you have enough time to spend with the person to understand that they've not understood the right message that you meant, because grammatically you could say something that makes sense with a perfective imperfective verb form, but the difference is actually only in the understanding, and so they don't react necessarily to a mistake as you might do with other mistakes in language, and that I think becomes the trickier thing in Slavic languages eventually. Just my thought on Slavic languages, but you will in the beginning stages, don't worry about it at all. Just learn things as you need them. So I would say give sort of these huge tables a wide berth and just say, okay, or treat them as reference only. Trying to remember all of the case forms for every single word is a big thing to do. It makes things feel much more difficult than they need to be, and many words you won't use some of the cases for anyway, because they won't come up. Like, it's you're just less likely to use them. So learn them as you need them, and be happy to make mistakes and to get them right later. If you get to the stage where you can communicate, you'll start to pick up the language in a more natural way anyway, because you'll be consuming more materials in the language. Richard, you have seen Professor Arguelles' latest video. People who don't know him have been clicking on his videos because of his cat. You need to get your cats in your videos. Yeah, yeah, his cat is really sweet and quite and quite docile, and will just sit there. Tiger is very loving. My cat is Tiger. We have a Garfield as well. They're very sweet cats, but they won't sit still, and I don't want to put them through that, especially during a live. It would be very chaotic. But maybe I should, but use my cats as to get me more likes or more followers. That would be so funny. But yeah, I mean, Alexander's sweet with his cats as well. Well, his cat as well. Yeah, I've met his cat. And he is in real life a very sweet cat. Okay, yeah, it's a good idea though. I'll have a talk to Garfield and Tiger and see what they say. Richard, how's low Saxon? Wereldsprok. Jizmuroid aversion. Corners of thought. Low Saxon is going to be on the move, I hope, at some point. You have to teach me Low Saxon now. Been doing Irish. That's Martin, and we study Irish together. But yeah, he's been getting things to teach Low Saxon, which I think sounds really cool. Feel free to give him a follow. He's on Wereldsprok. I'm going to try and pronounce it properly now. Wereldsproken on YouTube, and he's on a number of other things as well, like TikTok. He's on, and on Twitter and Instagram. So feel free to check him out. I've got a video of us speaking with Irish, and so I've got the details in one of the Irish videos. You can find him if you want. What languages liked? Thank you for liking. Yes, thank you for liking the video. It helps me to, if you like the video. I've got more people again on YouTube who are here but haven't liked the video yet. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe I'm like, put a dislike at least, even if you don't like it. Put a dislike if you don't like it, because at least it's a reaction that I can then see later. So know that you were here. You might hate me, so feel free to put a thumbs down if you want. Let me see. The nice bottle. Oh, it reminds me of the experiment you did in elementary school when we taped 2 plastic bottles together, then spun it and made underwater tornadoes. Oh, very cool. That sounds really nice. Richard, what are your thoughts on going wide, many languages, versus going deep, really mastering a few? Vasily, this is the thing that I don't think is... you asked me the question about going wide or going deep. I don't think it's a dichotomy. I think it's a false dichotomy as a question. So what I mean by that is, it's not 2 choices. It's not you either do this or you do that. You can do both. You can do both. And there's nothing stopping you doing both. So for example, somebody who does a PhD in 18th century French clothing as used in literature, they could do that and go super deep into the French language, right? But that does not stop them in their spare time from dabbling in a number of other languages. In fact, it's quite normal. I mean, there are people who study things that are not language related, who have a profession, and they do well at that profession or those professions, and they still study languages. And sometimes they'll study some languages to a high level, and then some to you know, sort of an A2 level where they get by, or maybe even be an A1 level where they just want to be able to ask basic questions when they go on holiday to Greece. It could just be things like that, you know, like, you know, where's the toilet? Here's my passport. What you want to eat, understanding the menu. That's A1. You don't need much more than A1 for that kind of stuff. So I don't see it as two things. I see it as you choose what you want to do. You can go deep in some and not in others, or you can go completely straight and say, okay, I'm just going to go and do like flat, like say flat, straight, flat, like this, and say I want to go wide and bright, you know, bright, wide with my languages, and study a lot of them as kind of to an A1, A2 level, or you can go deep in some and not, or you can just go deep and never touch another language. So I think that there are a few things in between here that we do. We don't have to choose one or the other, and that's fine. I'm in between. So I have languages that I don't necessarily need to speak to a high level. I just wanted to dabble in them. There are some languages, and people who study linguistics as well will often do things like this. They will study the mechanics of a language, maybe some core vocabulary, but they don't necessarily speak the language. So a linguist doesn't have to speak a language. A linguist is somebody who does the science behind the languages, into the mechanics of how it works. So not all linguists will speak a language to a C1 or C2 level, for example, but what they will do is be able to understand how the language works. And to do that, they study the grammar, they study the morphology, the syntax, all that kind of nice stuff that goes together and makes the language, and they know how it works. That's also an option, linguistics. Now, you can do all of them, and you can do a bit of each. You can do some of one or another, or whatever you want to do. And I think they're all valid. Look, I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's funny because I do see people getting criticized for things like, you know, how much they speak, or what they do, or what they do with their languages. I mean, even if like a person does something totally different to what you particularly want to do or like to do, and it could be something you really would not want to do yourself, so you almost have kind of a disliking for that way of doing languages, they're doing something positive still, because they're studying languages. They're not going on the street and selling something illegal. They're going, you know, they're going on the street and practicing a language, and often they'll bring a smile to someone's face, and that's great. It's really, yeah, from my point of view, I mean, I think everything's valid. I think everything's fine, as long as we're doing something positive with our knowledge. And if you can make a difference sometimes with your language knowledge, whether it's at a basic level or at a deeper level, hey, good luck to you. That's what I say. So there we go. Yeah, great question though. I like that you ask these questions, because it gets us all thinking about it, right, and talking about these topics that, particularly in the language learning community, come up again and again. Let me see. I would love to get my Chinese to B1, B2 level, but it's very difficult to find compelling, comprehensive input. Chinese readers are full of words that I don't use in daily life, such as emperor and castle. Exactly. Yeah, that can be a problem, Tomek. Absolutely. So the key then for you might be finding and discovering the topics that you do want to talk about. I mean, at some point at a B2 level, it would be expected that you would know words like emperor and castle, to be fair, because they will appear in history texts, or things that refer back to historical events in China. They're likely to appear quite often. But if I know what you mean, it's kind of more of an example, so I'm not going to sort of dwell on the two words that you've chosen here. You may have other words that you've seen that are totally not necessary for you right now, like usurp or something like that. I don't know. That may be a very much a more high level language, you know, piece that you'd want to know, or not want to know. And I would say put the onus back on yourself. So if you get to a point with the language where you know you're missing something, you can't talk about something, have a think about what you can't say. Note some things down that you want to talk about. So it could be news articles, it could be things that are happening, things that you're interested in, your hobbies, just things that you generally like and pique your interest. And find articles that are to do with that topic. look for the words and the phrases and expressions that are used in that language to talk about that topic, and then start practicing them. You can prepare topics with a language partner or teacher, and you can go through the text. You could read the text out, then you could talk about it. Then you could try and use the words that you've teased out of that text to give your own impressions and thoughts and opinions, and see how far you can stretch your language to get it to that B1 or B2 level. That's what I would do with that. So that could be using, when you're at B1, B2 level, really you should be able to start using some sources that are even meant for speakers of the language who are not learners as a second language. So have a look and see. There are many resources for Chinese, so it can get a bit overwhelming. But you could start with things like that you want to talk about. It will also help with your motivation. If you're motivated to talk about something because you like it, then you're more likely to retain the knowledge as well. And you're more likely to repeat it, which is the most important thing. Remember, the water from the funnel, you have to keep putting it in, right, to get it to stick, to get it to keep the language level. So things that you are likely and more interested in naturally to talk about are the things that you want to learn about. I think it's more realistic, for example, in Romance languages to get to B2 in French and B1 in Spanish instead of trying to get a B2 in both Spanish and French. What's your opinion on this? Potentially, the thing is with languages that are from the same family, you can basically, this is where it gets a bit tricky for people that learn multiple languages to say what level they're at in the languages. So let's go back to the funnel again. Let's say you've got French to kind of this stage. Let's say this is like a B2 stage. Imagine the funnel's going out further because it would go out further. But say you got to a B2 stage, right? And then you learn Spanish to kind of an A2, B1 level, and you're there. And what happens is, because the words are related, particularly the more complicated words in those languages, you can almost pass yourself off as a more sophisticated speaker of the language because of your knowledge of French. It works a similar way with English from French, because French words tend to be in English, tend to be quite high level words in English. So you do get this help from one language to another, particularly in the Romance languages, because there's a lot of similarities between them. It also happens with other language families or other languages that have had either cultural exchanges or linguistic exchanges, where the language has gone across or cut across barriers or international boundaries or linguistic groups, communities. You will find this. So yes, potentially it's more realistic. I don't know if that's ever been my goal to do something like that, but it definitely is easier to retain, because you're going to find that they start to balance each other a little bit as well, particularly if you feel very comfortable in one. Yeah. I like the idea of the funnel for another reason. Too much at once and a lot of water misses the funnel. Absolutely. So yeah, if you, for example, if you don't have that steady flow, I mean, I can't tip the water on my computer, but you imagine the water is coming out, right? So when you're tipping it in, the water is flowing around. And if you imagine that, and if you tip it in too quickly, it could definitely splash out and overflow. You're not going to retain it. So it needs to keep going through, cycling through. Absolutely. I'm glad you like that. I remember you saying saying that your most dominant Slavic language will usually come out, so it's probably more realistic to hit B2 in Russian and B1 in Ukrainian instead of trying to get B2 in both. Yeah, I mean, look, you never know what happens in life. This is the thing, right? I didn't ever really plan on particularly learning certain languages, but I ended up learning them, and some of them I ended up learning to a high level, just because my life went in a certain way, whether it was for work or for personal reasons or for my studies. I didn't know where it was going to go, but it went in the way it's gone, and now I've ended up with languages that I never imagined that I would study, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, just go for learning it. I think start little by little and see where it ends up. You never know. You really never know. I don't know if I planned that far in advance, but yes. No clap, please. Some people are scared of them. Okay, no cats then. I don't think my cats are going to come onto this, but yeah. What languages do your pets respond to? So I speak to my cats in English. My wife and my daughter speak to them in Macedonian. Some words I say in Macedonian because so there's a treat that we give them, and if I say it in English, they won't know what I'm talking about because my wife normally gives it to them. So I say that in Macedonian. Yeah. YouTube disabled dislikes recently because of the COVID vaccine videos would always get spammed with dislikes. Oh, right. So COVID saved my videos from being disliked. Yeah, keep liking me, please. Well, you can always like me. If you dislike me, you could just tell me you hate me. I mean, you know, it's fine. It's all good. It's all good. Just interact. It's all good. I spent years trying to learn languages only to find that I can't speak. I found that my motivation to learn maybe maybe intrinsic. Okay, I think it's because of the challenge. Yes. So depends on what you're doing. I'd need to dig a bit deeper with you to talk about that. I think for that chromatron, because yes, sorry, I'm trying to read your name there, but I can't make it out properly. Chromatinkis, is that right? So yeah, I it would be interesting to follow up more with that. I'm not sure exactly what's going on for you, but it looks like a conversation. And definitely I've come across where people have found it difficult to speak, and there are things that you can do to help your speaking. It feels like maybe a longer answer than what I could possibly give you here now. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a baby steps thing. Really is super important, and getting yourself to a point where you're using the language as much as possible. Often that will mean reading things aloud to your conversation partner or the person you're speaking to, whether it's a teacher or whatever, just so that you at least get the practice in, and then ad-libbing and making up your own stuff from there. For example, in North America, you don't need to speak Spanish on a high level. A B1 is enough. Even some native Spanish speakers in the United States don't speak Spanish real. Yeah, sometimes B1 is absolutely enough. I found for years that A2 B1 level in Greek was perfect for travel to Greece. I didn't particularly need any more than that, and I got on fine. I got to a B1 level in French and with Lingoda recently, but I'm better at reading comprehension and not so much with listening and speaking. Those last two have always been difficult for you. Okay, any tips? So typically for many people, reading and reading and sometimes even writing, but reading particularly is the easiest skill to feel confident in, and that's just because you are doing something passive. You're reading. What reading does do is it gets you exposed to the language. Probably it's one of the quickest way to get yourself exposed to lots of languages in a short space of time. What it doesn't do is necessarily activate the language knowledge for you to use for the skills that you're finding difficult, which are speaking and even listening sometimes as well. It won't help unless you're listening to things regularly too. The only way to remedy it is by practicing. I mean, there's no, I mean, you know, more reading is not necessarily going to help your speaking ability or your listening ability. Only more practice listening and more practice speaking is going to do that. And for that, it would be good to know what you're doing at the moment. So question, okay, what are you putting in at the moment to get those skills better? If the answer to that is not very much, then how can you change it? And if the answer to that is, I don't know how, language teachers, language exchanges would be good. if you live in the country, then you can practice with people in the country, join clubs and things like that. You're using text with the language already written. For example, language like French, there are lots of podcasts and things that you can use where you've got the written word and also the audio, so you can listen to it and see what you understand without reading it. Then you can read it and then practice then taking away the written again and see how much you understand when it's just spoken. So sometimes it's repetitive, but repetition is all in language learning. That's all it's about, really. It's repeating things until they become completely normal for you. So that's what I would do. I would love to be a linguist if languages have a pattern like a family tree. I would love to see the connections. Yeah, that's probably one of the coolest things about learning multiple languages, actually. I really enjoy the free insight into etymology without necessarily studying etymology as a subject. And sometimes linguistics. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I study linguistics through it, but there are some insights you get when you study different languages, because you naturally make linguistic comparisons between the languages as you learn them. And so there are certain things that you sort of pick up on. And then when you hear linguists talk about them, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense, because, yeah, in that language, that's what happens. So sometimes linguistics is a really good tool to not have to go through, learning through all the languages or learning lots of languages. You can actually read about the connections from people who have already been and done all that legwork, which is cool. Etymology is also super, super cool. That's my favorite thing, is etymology. I love the links. Okay, let me see. I know a Russian person who works in. Okay, let me see. Richard, when do you usually add a new language? Sorry if you've answered this question before, but I haven't heard your opinion on it. Zed, I answer when I want, really. I don't necessarily wait particularly. If there's a need for me, or a strong desire to learn some of a language, then I might just start looking at it. I may not carry on. I might just start looking at it and see, okay, is this a thing that I can do right now? And then I'll decide what can give, what can't give, and then I'll make a decision based on what I've seen. But there isn't a definite pattern to it. There are certainly languages that I started looking at where I wasn't necessarily planning on doing it, but then I've just decided that I will look at them and not worry too much, not put any pressure on myself. I think the key is to make sure that you also work towards the other goals that you have. So at the moment, one of my key goals is to get ready for my Cornish exam in May, June. Make sure I can pass that, and then I'll be halfway through the Cornish exams, and also continuing to speak it. And also I want to improve my Irish still, so I'm continuing with that, but adding more. I kind of just do play with them a lot, and so I don't worry too much. It depends on how much time you have, and you will know when it feels that you can realistically add another language or study another language, and how intensely you can study it. Because because you say study another language, it doesn't mean that you need to study it with the same intensity as the other ones. You can just play with it. You can just look at it. You can try and get an understanding for how the language works. You don't necessarily need to go a deep dive into the language, right? You can just start at a very slow pace. And that's fine. For some languages, that could be getting familiar with the sounds, getting familiar with the writing system. So a language like Korean, for example, you could just very easily do that, and you're not necessarily learning words, you're just learning sounds and how it's different to other languages you've learned before. And that's very much what my goal with Korean changed to last year, was more familiarization with the language than anything else, because I found it very difficult to remember the words and retain them, because it sounded quite different to the other languages I'd studied. And I'm glad I made that choice. And so it's easy to keep Korean on the side while I do other things. and it doesn't interfere so much. But I'm also I have to make peace with myself with the new goal for that. So you have to be very honest with yourself about, okay, what's my new goal? What am I actually happy with? And as long as you're happy with it, you can start a new language when you want. Usually, though, it's always good to remember, if your goal is to make progress and to feel that you're moving forwards quite quickly, the more languages you add to an intensive period of language study, the more you divide your time. So I would definitely say consider that too, what you're happy with for the goals in the other languages you're learning. Okay, let me see. How do you use Anki with getting burnt out? How many cards a day and stuff? Chess, I don't really use Anki. So I don't have a number of cards that I use for it. I have been using Memrise a bit more recently, and I put in I'm following actually some courses that were made by people who followed exactly the same courses that I'm doing, and I know the people who made them. So I'm following those for Cornish and Irish particularly. I do dabble in a few others every now and again, but they're the ones that I follow mostly. And for the Irish one, it's 15 words a day because it's the first course that I did and finished. And then for Cornish, it's also 15 words for the one that I finished. And also I do a couple of other things where it's other courses that I've done in the past. So like maybe 5 a day. But I think 5 is plenty, to be honest. 5 is a good target. Depends on you, depends on what time you've got available. But yeah, 5 for me was plenty. Let me see. Yes, some people confuse linguistic with multilingual polyglot, and I often get asked if I'm a linguist and tell them that I'm not and consider myself non-linguist. Yeah, people do get those mixed up. There's a knack you pick up Spanish flying an hour from another language, but it's quite often it will be correct. Yeah, you can get a lot of free words and free grammar from other languages that are similar. So I mean, when people say they learn a language in a few weeks or a few months, if they speak a language that's similar, they can sound like they can communicate maybe a lot of stuff. The thing is that they may have holes. So in the language, they might be missing certain words that are very different. So if you're learning Spanish and then you learn Catalan, well, you'll be able to say quite a lot of stuff in Catalan quite quickly, but will you know the word for yellow, which is very different, or the word for dog, which is very different in Catalan to Spanish and French, to other languages? Those two words are very different. Would you know them? Not necessarily. And would you necessarily understand their way of using the verb ana, to go, as an auxiliary for past tense instead of just future tense? They're things that are not automatic and require some effort to study and to learn. And there are a number of other words. It's not just those, it's a lot more. They've got a different grammar, but the shortcuts will take you some places, but they would be basic things that you would learn at A1, A2 level in Catalan. But if you were just to try and shortcut it and jump straight to kind of a conversational level, you could have those kinds of gaps in your knowledge. And so the parallels go on for many other languages as well. Craig, get interested in space, but listening to Greek astronomers is quite difficult, I can imagine. Instead of working my way through with, okay, the Greek chef, and also Happy Travel on YouTube. Okay, that sounds cool. Yeah, I mean, astronomy, you might want to wait a little bit longer if you're finding it too difficult. But the languages aren't going anywhere. I mean, as long as you're doing something positive, I think that's great. Would you say what would you say the best ways for improving writing in a foreign language and preparing for the French B2? Writing. The best way to improve your writing is to write. There's no Practice writing is really important. Getting past papers for the exams that you're going to sit and looking at the types of questions that they ask. They tend to get used again and again. Looking for the types of constructions and grammar that they use for that level, and making sure you incorporate them in your writing to show off your writing skills. Because what an examiner is looking for really is to be able to give you marks to show that you've learnt the materials that are taught at that level. And then I would say, using sites like Journaly to to go on and practice your writing and then get corrections would be a good idea. For the B2 level, you might want to look at a French book called Mot à Mot, which is used in schools in the UK for A level, which is around about B2 level. And that has a lot of sort of starter questions to start arguments, to end arguments, to add a bit of flowery language to your piece. You might want to learn some of those. So that's it. And that course also exists for Spanish, palabra por palabra, parola per parola in Italian, and word for word in German. So you might want to look at them in other languages as well. You can. So yes, they're very cool. Is it a good idea to watch a film in English or your mother tongue and subtitles in the target language? You can do either. Some people prefer the original language and then subtitles in their own language. Some people prefer it the other way around. At the moment, or today, not at the moment, I've done this already, but today I watched an episode of Star Trek in Turkish and had subtitles in English. And actually, to be honest, I don't really need the subtitles at this point because I've been through the whole of Star Trek Voyager in Turkish anyway, but I do anyway, just in case there's something that I've missed, and it helps. It does help. But I was used to doing that, and when I lived in the Netherlands, I used to do it the other way around because TV was mainly in English, but they had subtitles in Dutch, and I could read Dutch fairly quickly, quite quickly as well. So that helped a lot with my language. So I found it both ways. I learned Serbian and Croatian in a similar way. I used to read subtitles and hear the original language, whether it was English or Turkish or Macedonian or whatever it was, and I would read it in that language. So yeah, and it worked. How's your private language coaching going? Are you dedicating much time to this? Yeah, I'm enjoying it actually. I really enjoy it. So I have language learning therapy sessions, which we do a few times a week. And they are groups of us that get together and we talk about what we're finding difficult, what we're finding easy, what we need help with, specific questions, reporting back on how we're getting on with the languages. And yet they're a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm enjoying it very, very much. And the individual ones that I do as well are also a lot of fun. Do very, very different things. Sometimes very different languages that people are studying. Sometimes the sessions are more to do with general language study needs. Sometimes they're tips on very specific languages and what to do with them and how to improve them. And I really enjoy all of them, to be honest. I really do. They're a lot of fun. Being a celebrity, what happens when you join a language class? I'm sure the teachers are terrified. Do you know, I'm not a celebrity, first of all. I'm trying to think if I've been in classes where people have known who I am, for sure, because I'm in the language space, right? So in the language space, I'm probably more known than in other spaces. No, it gets very normal very quickly. In the first few days, people will ask me maybe questions if I'm on like an intensive course or something. I might get asked questions. But I used to get asked questions a lot anyway, because I would, like, even before anyone knew who I was in other things, I would get asked questions because I'd speak some languages that people didn't expect me to speak, or why was I studying Greek in the Netherlands when I was a Brit and not studying? And I was like doing all my interactions in Dutch outside the class, but speaking in Dutch and Greek in class. But for me, that was probably the weirder thing, I think, for people, because they don't expect Brits to be doing courses through the language of the country in another language or something else. They expect you to be just trying to learn the local language. But people get over it quite quickly. Yeah, and the teachers are great. I really enjoy it. I love classes. When you take language exams, like your Cornish exam, is your goal to pass and get a 70%, or to try and get a 90% or higher? I don't really worry too much, as long as I feel comfortable with the language at that level. Do I know it? Do I not know it? It may go either way. In the exam, you know, I might get a topic that I'm not 100% on, that I feel maybe a little bit less certain about some of the spelling or some of the specific words that I'm asked for. So I might have to word my way around it. And then another time you might get exactly everything that you know. So I recognize that if I get a very high mark, I got a high mark on a good day. And if I get a low mark, I got a low mark on a bad day. So I tend to know where I am roughly. You know, I mean, I would be surprised at this point if I were to do the Cornish exam tomorrow. I think I would still pass it. But I do want to improve my ability in Cornish, because my goal isn't necessarily just to pass exams. The exam I find just a really nice focal point for my studies, so that I can sit down, get a certificate and say, you've achieved that, it's kind of crossed off, move to the next level. There's something quite nice about that. I like it, but it's not for everyone. Psychologically for me, it works well. But yeah. Okay. One of it helps anyone wishing to wait until study linguistics. Make sure that one you want to focus on before. There are tons of them, like psychology. Yeah, there are lots of different types of linguistics that you can get into. Absolutely. Can you write them down, a French book that you recommend, in the chat? Yes, I can. More and more. Oh, that's been written down. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for writing that down, Jordan. I appreciate it. Would you say that when preparing for a language exam, it's better to use one-to-one classes like italki, or to go to a language course where there are other students? Very good question. As long as your teacher knows what the exam's about and they can help you prepare for it, or if you feel confident to prepare for it yourself, you can do either. I personally like language courses and lessons with groups of people, but I get it's not for everyone. Depends how happy you are with the speed, the speed that they go at. I've been very happy with a very normal, slow speed with Cornish for a year and a half. My Cornish hasn't been going very quickly, but the thing about it is that I do know the words because I've practiced them so many times. So yeah, but I really like the courses, and I've made friends with the people on them. They're really nice. It makes me also not study so crazily for the language. It gives me a nice pace. And what's fun is you could sit there and sort of get frustrated and say, okay, I'm going to rush through a language and then forget it, or forget a lot of it, or not feel secure, or feel that you've got holes in it. Or you can take it really slowly and sort of build up that level slowly but surely. And you can kind of do that. And when you get to the exam and you pass it and you move on, it's amazing how quickly the years turn, right? And you end up with quite a good level in a language without really doing a huge amount for it. But it takes it takes years. I mean, this will be my second year. Of course, it's my second year of Cornish. So I did my first grade 1 exam last year. I did my grade 2 exam a year after. And it's kind of like an A2-ish level, I guess. I thought it was around about an A2-ish level last time, but it's probably now, I think that it's more an A2 level, where I can say, because I can say quite a few things now in Cornish, and I could answer questions. If people ask me questions in Cornish, I can answer them. I'm not completely lost, but it's still got a long way to go. And I'll carry on. I'll do next year. I'll do grade 3, and then there's one more grade 4, and the grade 4 exam normally is done over 2 years for Cornish, and you do a literature exam and a language exam, and that takes you to kind of like a B2-ish level, I guess. Ish. yeah, grade 3 is kind of more like the B1-ish, I guess, something like that. So we'll see. I'm going to carry on. I like it. It's good fun. I like the people. I'm going through Instagram now just to check for any things. Things with Instagram, I get so many hellos, and it's lovely to get the hellos. Can I ask you something about you? I don't know. Can you can ask me something about me? I will choose whether or not I answer. I don't know. It sounds very ominous. Sure, it really sucks often when people around you speak other languages that you're trying to. Yeah, you try to progress. Yeah, it can be challenging. Keeping in mind what we want to do is important. Do you speak Russian? Yeah, I can communicate in Russian. I lived in Moldova for a time and I had to speak Russian there. And so, yeah, Russian and Romanian, I spoke there. Russian was easier for me because it's a Slavic language, like my home language. How is it possible to measure the level in a language we know? Are there tests or speaking tests enough to say exact level? So this is actually one of the things I do in my consultancy role. Is I will do interviews with people to figure out what kind of level they're at in a language for work, and we do this in interview style and also with written exams. So yes, it is possible if you're very confident with what you need to know at a certain level, and you can make judgments in languages that maybe are not standardized. You can kind of make a bit of a judgment. It's not completely scientific in that. Look, I mean, you can pass an A2 level exam, for example, or a B1 level exam with 60 or 62%, and then you could pass it with 99. There's a big difference in knowledge. So it's not as precise as measuring water, for example. Like I was showing you the water, it's not as precise as that. So yes, you can. If you're learning languages that are particularly popular in terms of being studied by people in many countries, then absolutely you can sit exams. They have the Cervantes Institute for Spanish. They have the Alliance Française or the Institut Français for French. They have the Goethe Institute for German. They have the Yunus Emre Institute for Turkish, which is what I used for Turkish. You've got the Pushkin for Russian. You've got the Dante Institute for Italian. You've got the Confucius Institute for Chinese, and I'm probably going to be missing some, but there's some for you. You also have like standardized tests for very famous ones for Korean and for Japanese that you can sit as well. So there's quite a lot that you can do, and you can do those in different countries, I believe. So not just in the countries themselves. So yeah, it's worth checking out to see what kind of exam you want to do, and if you can do it where you are locally or travel to a center easily. Let me see. Enjoy to prove and evolve my B2 to at least 2 language, and now maybe A2 in another. But having B2 would be really direct to copy the accent of natives. How do you do that? Oh, copying the accent of somebody who speaks it from sort of as a first language or a native level. I don't always try and do that, to be honest. I like to try and imitate accents in that I find it fun, but I don't necessarily try to speak exactly like a native level speaker 100% of the time. And the reason is because I will never be able to be that. I'll never be able to be that would like as though I was a monolingual speaker of that language. It's not going to happen. And I'm very happy with that situation. I'm definitely at peace with that situation. It's normal. So sometimes it can be very confusing to speakers if you are able to perfectly imitate an accent, and then you make really strange mistakes or really strange word choices. It's never been an important thing for me to do that. Okay, I had a bit of an unstable connection there for a second. Here I'm back. So yes, let me see any more questions here. I'm conscious of the time. I'll see what I can do to add a bit more. ¿Qué es tu? Have you ever walked the Jacob's Way, Camino de Santiago, and practiced languages on the way? I haven't. No, I've never done that. You're going on your third time. Wow, that's impressive. Wow, enjoy. I hope it all works out well. Sounds like a fun thing to do, but no, I've not done it. Not done it. Let me see. Okay, I think I got to the end of the questions there. I'm just going to have one more go. Yeah, it lost me. I'm back. Good. Okay, I'm just going to have one more look on YouTube to see any other questions, and then I will disappear. Not Harry Potter style, but I'll end the live. Okay. Lots of people watching TV shows in your target language with subtitles is native languages not effective. Do you agree? JR, it depends on the language. So difficult to say. So depends on the language and on the learner. Very much depends on the language and the learner. So I've met many people who do pick up languages, or at least find the language learning easier after they've watched lots of the language or listened to a lot of the language. And if you already speak a similar language, then it does help. It helped me with Dutch, for example, because I could make out a lot. Helped me with Serbian and Croatian because I could make out a lot from the other Slavic languages. So it did help me a lot to see the words and to just get it. But it comes down to comprehensible input for that, I think. Or somebody who's extremely focused on the content and is just wants to suck up as much as possible, and things start to stick. If they're watching the context with the content, for example, it can help to get words to stick. But in combination, I think with learning actively is more effective. Yoga Bliss, you always catch the end. Well, you catch the end, but you catch something, which is good. It's good to see you. And we'll speak soon. Would you say Speakly is your go-to after one-to-one classes? I want to find something I could do for German classes right now, out of question. Okay, German classes out of the question. Rasmus, yeah, I found. Look, I mean, I used Speakly for 2 months in the end, and after a month, I did an interview on TV. So clearly, something worked in it. I mean, and I only used Speakly. I tried to do exactly what they said. I used it exclusively. I didn't use anything else, and clearly, I was able to have an interview. I set up the interview through Estonian, and it worked. Is it my go-to app for everything? No, because they have a lot of languages that I've already studied and speak. So apart from Estonian, there's Finnish on there that I've studied before to kind of like an A2 plus, A2.5 level. And then the other languages, I mean, I'm guessing that I would be beyond what they have on the app, because the app takes you to kind of, they say around a B2 level ish, B1, B2 level, I guess. So it's yeah, I mean, I've worked and I have a degree in French, Spanish, Italian, which are 3 languages they have in there, and then also I've worked in German for many years. So yeah, that's the other language they have, and then the other ones are Finnish, Russian. I don't really need to improve my Russian for any particular reason, so I'm happy with the level it's at. And Finnish, I'm not learning at the moment. I think it would be very confusing with Estonian to go back to it. So not my go-to in terms of that, but so I can't pretend it is. But I did find it effective for Estonian. If you're interested, I think the discount codes that they gave me when I studied will still work. So if you find one of the Estonian videos, you can use the discount code. It gives you, I think, 40% off. So feel free to use that if you want to try it and use it, or if you want to try it and then buy it. You may as well have the discount. I mean, I don't get anything from it. They gave it to me when I did the challenge for anyone who was watching me and wanted to get a discount. So feel free if you fancy trying it. Let me see. I can say something. For me personally, I only made sense to watch films with subtitles. Often I get certain level of English and Lithuanian, like A2. So yes, cool. Nice that you mentioned Lithuanian, actually. Somebody asked me the other day how many people are learning Lithuanian, and I never see it mentioned that often. I don't see it mentioned very often. Let me see. Why do you think languages are taught in the proper version rather than colloquial? One example is Japanese with the word desu, and it's not much used when speaking. This is a very long thing, because the example with Japanese might be easier to go for, but I think possibly that's a topic for another week, because it's a question that comes up particularly for languages like Arabic, where what do you learn? MSA or standard Arabic, or standard Arabic, MSA, Fusha, or do you learn a dialect? Or what do you do with, I mean, Finnish, for example. Finnish is another good example. You can sit and learn Finnish, and then the way they speak in Finland is completely different. So what do you learn? You can do that with a lot of languages, actually. Good question. Yeah, I think it's going to take me more time than I have already over time, but I will come back to that. It's a good question. What are your thoughts on learning German grammar? I don't remember whether you were programmer or not. I'm programmer in that I think that grammar can help you find an understanding in a clearer way of your content with grammatical explanations. It can be a shortcut instead of like just not knowing whether or not you've fully understood it. It can explain it. It can cut through a lot of time and nonsense. But if you are not into grammar and you read grammar, it can be very off-putting, and then maybe just learn it in context. But yeah, I'm very much for context learning anyway, but I think that grammar can help you cut through to make sure you fully understood, because it can give you examples and things that you won't necessarily find very quickly back to back in your reading or your listening or anything else. So I'm back. Okay, cool. Okay, talking of Dutch, did your German knowledge help you in learning Dutch? Absolutely, yeah. German helped a lot in learning Dutch, for sure. There's no doubt about it. But also, it's funny you talk about that, because the place I lived in Germany, they spoke, there were some people who spoke Plattdeutsch around me. So yeah, this low Saxon. So I was very used to low Saxon. and so when I went to learn Dutch, I had some low Saxon words that I knew, like in low Saxon, in spoken where I was, they would say zeggen instead of sagen. So, and they say wat and dat instead of was and das. So there were already those words that I knew straight away. When I saw Dutch, it wasn't like, what's all this? It's what's all this magic? It was fairly understandable. But yeah, it did help a lot. But I mean, honestly, English, French, and German all help, and the Scandinavian. And I spoke Swedish at the time as well, so having that background in those languages did help learn Dutch. And I think also with pronunciation, because of Welsh and my Scouse dialect, where we have the ch sound anyway, in my Scouse English, we have a ch. That helped with Dutch too, because I could make those sounds more naturally. I think it wasn't such a big thing. I mean, you have it in Spanish too, but I've again, in Spanish it was helped because I have them in my original dialect of English, and And so, yeah, it can actually help to speak one of these dialects, like Scouse, because you've got sounds that other English speakers don't have. And then in Welsh we have the ch as well, with the ch sound. So yeah, that helps. And even though I didn't grow up speaking Welsh as fluent language, I did have Welsh words in my English growing up, and Welsh phrases in my English growing up. So I knew lots of those sounds because I was just used to them. Okay, let me see. I think I got a lifetime subscription a while ago and discounted price, not even comparable to a lifetime subscription. Okay, cool. That's good. You're waiting for the release of Norwegian on Speakly. Yeah, I've not seen it come through yet. Native English speaker, someone who speaks French. Okay, let me see. I think it's a nice conversation you're having about colloquial. I'll probably do a talk on that as well. 1 week, maybe even next week, we can talk about colloquial versus standard language, and talk through a few languages and what we actually mean by that, and go into a bit more detail. We can have a deeper dive into colloquial and standard languages. I think that'd be quite a cool thing. Thank you all so much for joining me, and for your likes. Remember to drop a like if you haven't done so already. Follow me if you're not following me already, and please do check out Patreon if you want more individual advice on your specific concerns, and also feel free to fill out the application form. It will close on the 15th, I think I put, of this month, and I am going to choose people who, it's not, I mean, you said what you would potentially be happy to give us for my time, but I'm not necessarily going to have that as my deciding thing. It will be very much on where I think I can help you, and if you think I can help you and I think I can help you, then for me that's a win-win. It was lovely to see you all, and yeah, thank you for joining again, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. I think next week in many countries is going to be Easter, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're around, or if you're not around, then have a nice Easter. Happy Ramadan to everyone out there celebrating Ramadan as well. And the week after is Easter for the Orthodox people, and so that week I'm likely to not be online at my regular time. I don't know completely yet, but I just want to let you know I'm likely not to be around, but I will see you next week for sure, and I look forward to it. Take care, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye, and happy language learning.